No!
Okay, this will be a very short video because it's a small problem, I hope. I recently got an ABIT BE6 II motherboard and it has a problem with the keyboard. Out of nowhere, the keyboard LEDs start flashing and I can no longer control any keyboard input. I already replaced the mouse and keyboard connector because I thought there might be something wrong with them, but no, the problem is still there. So while the keyboard was flashing, I tried to poke around the board, and sure enough, once I poked around these chips here, the keyboard started flashing again. So I believe we have a small issue either with one of these chips or it's just a bad solder joint. One chip is from Texas Instruments and the other one is from Fairchild, I believe. I don't know exactly what are the model numbers here. It could be the top line for this chip or the bottom line. I'm not sure exactly, but I found only a datasheet for the F244, and that is a 8-channel bipolar buffer with 3-state outputs. And the other one is a 3-state octal D-type transparent latches and edge-triggered flip-flop. I have absolutely no idea what that is. I know they're passing some signals, and if a signal is not transported properly, then we may end up with this behavior that we see on the keyboard LEDs. There are also two other chips nearby, and I think these ones are for the serial ports if I'm not mistaken. The GD75232D, and there is another one, GD75232D. So I think these two are responsible for the serial ports, but these ones may be somehow responsible for, I don't know, some type of bus communication. So let's now have a look and see if we can find something on these solder joints. Well, I guess I already have too much experience with bad solder connections, specifically on Voodoo cards, where things are just turning out to be working in intermittently and then you get very weird behavior. No, this one seems to be okay still. I'm not sure. The solder looks fine, but at the same time I'm not convinced that this is really a strong solder connection. But something is weird with the solder joint. Something doesn't... that may just be the flux, the reflection in the flux that is... But here it's nothing. No, here is it. I don't know. So it might just be the cover of the flux. But I'm sure that the keyboard behavior did change once I touched one of these chips. Maybe I should try and see if one of these chips connects to the keyboard connector. That might be something that would be helpful. I followed the keyboard connector and tried to find out where it connects to. It definitely does not connect to these chips. So yeah, even if the keyboard reset once I pressed on this part on the board, it is not the cause why our keyboard doesn't work. At least these chips are not. Yeah, let me just reflow because I poked around the solder joints that much. I want to make sure they are refreshed. And then we can continue to look for the issue that causes our keyboard not to work correctly. Okay, so here is our keyboard connector, and we can see there are already two lines that are not connected, 2 and 6. By the way, this is a very interesting pinout. You have all the odd numbers on the right and all the even numbers on the left in terms of pin numbers. So we have pin number 5, which is the clock. We have 3 that is ground, and we have 1 data connection, which is pin number 1. Then we have a non-connected pin, and we have a 5-volt power supply, and then number 6 is also not connected. So we should easily be able to figure out 2 pins. Pin number 4 should connect to our power supply, the 5-volt rail, and pin number 3, which should connect to our ground. So basically to any screw hole that's on the motherboard should also make contact with pin number 3 on our keyboard connector. Okay, let's quickly start with ground. Ground is pin number 3, which is the one to the right. And let's see if we have a connectivity to our screw hole here. Yes. Yes, this is definitely ground. Okay. And then pin number 4, which is exactly opposite, this one here should go to our power supply. I think this is 5 volt. Unfortunately, our 5 volt rail is not as easy. This motherboard comes with a function to disable the keyboard, and this is this jumper here. And this seems to be just cutting the 5 volt power supply to our keyboard connector here. So if we follow from our 5 volt power supply connector, which is this one here, so second pin on the left, we can follow that this goes through our jumper here. And when this jumper is closed, the 5 volt rail continues here through this diode, and then we're here, and then this connection here goes directly to our keyboard connector. And this is it. So we definitely have our 5 volt power supply and we have ground connected to our power connector. And I don't believe that we have an issue with these 2 pins. So that leaves us with the clock signal and the data signal. And in order to figure out what's the problem there, we need an oscilloscope. Okay, let's just start from the right. Let's have a look at our clock signal for the keyboard. And that signal connects to this inductor. Now let's see the connectivity to our keyboard connector. Yes, so we can use the oscilloscope to probe on this specific point. And the data connection, which is on pin number 1, also goes to an inductor, which is right next to our clock inductor. So we could easily measure which of these 2 signals are messed up in case we get these flashing lights again. Okay, the system is running. Let's check if our numlock works. Yes, it does. So let's add our probe on this one and let's send some data. This is the data pin. You could see it here. And what about the clock signal? Well, we also get some data here when we are pressing buttons only. But the question is, which signal is messed up when we get to our flashing lights? So for that, I will go ahead now and try to flex the board. Okay, I'm on the clock signal. No, I'm on the data signal. The numlock is working. So let's see what happens when I press on that specific spot on the board. Oh, nothing. The keyboard is not responding right now. It's not causing that issue. Every time you see the small drop on the oscilloscope, this is when the keyboard reinitializes. And unfortunately, the clock as well as the data signal is affected. There is something going on when I'm pressing on the printer port, the parallel port. Maybe we're somewhere completely different. It's the parallel port. When I press on it, things are changing. And we see a small change on the clock signal. I'm on the clock signal right now. Let's go to the data signal. So it could be both. Yeah, so here we also get the reinitialization. The keyboard is constantly reinitializing when I'm pressing a little bit on the LPT port. And again, it did the same thing. I noticed this now because I'm resting my hand that holds the probe of the oscilloscope on the LPT port or the parallel port. And because of this, I notice now that, every time I put a little bit pressure on it, it causes this issue with the keyboard. Somewhere is a loose connection. This completely looks like a loose connection. I think we have to make sure it's not our 5 volt line. So we can measure our 5 volts on that jumper after the diode. So one division is 5 volts. Let's see if we get 5 volts. Yes, exactly here 5 volts. And let's see what happens when I'm pressing on the board and the keyboard reinitializes. It did reinitialize, but there was nothing happening on the 5 volts. So it is either the clock or the data signal. Yeah, I tried it again, nothing. So the 5 volts seem to be stable. So it's not the jumper. That could be a possibility. Maybe it's corroded or something and you move the board a little bit and then the jumper doesn't make proper connection and suddenly 5 volts is gone. But that is not the case. So next up is, let's follow the clock signal and the data signal and see to which chip it goes. Yeah, clock signal. So the problem is, obviously, if I'm going to probe around, I mean, like, where would I go around to figure out where this clock signal is? So what I do sometimes is I just use one of these copper soldering tip cleaners. They are conductive. So what I can do is I can just leave my multimeter here on one side of the circuit that I'm looking for. And then I can just do like this. And sometimes I will find where this connection goes to. Ah, okay. Where is it? Okay. It's beeping somewhere. Now you can reduce the amount of copper cleaner that touches the board. Ah, okay. Jumper? I think it's this chip. Maybe here? Ah, here. Here is our connection that goes to this inductor on the top. So this was our clock signal. Let's check where the data signal goes. So the data signal most likely goes also to this chip then. Yeah, there you go. So both go to this chip. So if I press the board here, so it bends down, it could affect this chip. Maybe we just have to reflow this chip. Well, this is what I will do now because this looks to me like a bad solder connection. Let's look under the microscope and have a look at this chip. Okay, and here is our Winbond chip. And I think we had connections here in the corners and over here. So let's zoom in a little bit and have a look at the solder connections. I think this is it. It moves. It is the same. It is the same problem like on the voodoo cards. This, if I move it a little bit more, then it will just break off. You can see I can move this pin. And this most likely is our problem. Now I want to double check if this is really the one that connects to one of our inductors that we have tested before. My goodness. So let's check. This one was, I think, the clock. I don't remember. Clock or data signal. Let's see which one it is. Yeah, this is our pin. Well, it's actually the one before. So I'm pretty sure I can move this too. I mean, this entire chip doesn't look like it has good solder connections. Yeah, I can move this as well. So yeah, let's reflow this chip and then we'll see if the problem is gone. Actually, before I do this, let's have a look at the other pin here. I think there was also one. Well, this side looks better, to be honest. The solder joints here look a lot better. That's interesting. Oh! Not good. Not good. Okay. Is this also one of these pins that we had? Now I'm really after this, trying to 100% make sure it's this chip. No, it's the third one. It is the third pin. Anyway, it doesn't have to be this pin. It could be just an input signal that drives the other pins. Yeah, anyway. I don't want to press too hard. I know I will ruin it. I will just go ahead now and reflow this chip, and then we will see if our keyboard problems are gone. Well, now at least we know where the keyboard seems to be connecting to and where it sends the data to, because in 286 systems and 386 systems, you had that dedicated keyboard controller. So this one seems to be part of this Winbond chip here. Now I know where all these chips got integrated to. So let's see if we can make nice new solder connections here. The solder is flowing nicely, as you can see. I think these ones look now nice again. This side didn't look too bad. The one on the other side, the one that faces to the top, looked a lot worse. But let's just reflow this entire chip, and then hopefully our problem is gone. At least this chip doesn't have so many pins like the 3DFX chip. What is it, 102? Is this 102 pin? No, I don't think so. This doesn't make any sense. Does it? 102? Do we have 102 pin? $128. This makes more sense. Yes. So this side is already complete. No solder bridges. Let's do this one here that looked very questionable as well. So let's reflow the solder here. Yeah, that looks so much better. Now, if it works, we know it was related to this chip. It's always good to tackle the problem chip by chip, because you may not know if you're reflowing a lot of other chips if it was related to this one or not. Did we figure out which chip is our culprit or not? You can only do this if you fix one issue at a time. Okay, and we're done. Now I'll just clean up this chip, inspect it one more time, see if I can see any type of solder bridge, and if that's not the case, we'll try this board and see if the keyboard works now.
No! It's still there! How? Hey. Could it be the BIOS chip?
Oh no, how could I have missed that? So here is our Winbond chip, and then if you go further down, here is our BIOS chip, and next to the BIOS is another Winbond chip, this one, the W83782D. Yeah, but you may have already seen there is a pin that is tilted inside, and on top of it it's loose. I still don't understand if this could have been the problem, because if I'm pressing on the parallel port, how would this come all the way there? That would be so weird, but yeah. Maybe I should check what this pin is, but first let's fix it. So yeah, this pin is really badly deformed. Let's increase the light a little bit. This will be difficult to straighten, but let's see. I hope I don't break it off. Is this pin loose inside the chip? I'm not sure. I have a feeling if I bend this back, I will probably break it off. But we need to know. We need to know if this is bad or not. Okay, worst case, we will break it now, but that's okay, because then I have to solder a wire there. But does this have to do anything with the keyboard? That would be so odd. But that's the only thing I could spot now. Okay. I think we managed to get this pin back. If it is really broken, it should have come off. Okay. Now we need to bring it back in shape. No, this is broken. This is broken inside the chip. I'm pretty sure it did break. It does twist. It shouldn't twist. Oh, there you go. Yeah, it's broken. It's 100% broken. Okay. Let's see if we can see a crack. Yeah. Can you see it? There is a tiny crack. Right here. Solder alone probably is a little bit too weak, but the leg looks okay. I may just reinforce it with a little bit of extra wire. Maybe this chip is completely unrelated and nothing we're doing here is going to fix our keyboard issue. Oh my goodness, if this is the issue. Well, let's hope. Okay, let's see if this works now. Okay, let's try again. This, by the way, is the tiny chip. So we should get our keyboard now. Yes. Okay, and let's see what happens. No. How many problems do I have to solve along the way until we can figure out what's wrong with this keyboard? Okay, so it was not that chip, unfortunately. If I press on the center of the parallel port, the keyboard restarts.
There are some components behind this. We have somewhere a component that is not soldered correctly. I'm absolutely certain of it. Another possibility could be that we have a broken trace somewhere, but that will be a pain to figure out what it is. We already checked the 5-volt line. When the keyboard restarted, the 5 volts were present. If I press very, very soft on this connector, how? What's happening here? Or even the USB port here. Okay. So USB port causes the same problem. It's not our connection of the keyboard.
Okay, so reflowing this chip didn't bring anything. Reflowing these 3 chips didn't change anything. And fixing the lag of this chip didn't bring anything. But we have seen now that the problem is somehow related to the keyboard connector. So I went ahead and removed it. Maybe there was a problem with one of the vias connecting to the trace. But unfortunately, everything seems to be in perfect order. And we have also seen that it was related to our 5-volt line, which I ruled out initially. It is not the data line or the clock line. Now, the 5-volt line is for both connectors. This one here is the keyboard connector, these in U-shape orientation. This is for the keyboard connector. And this one here is for the mouse port. The 5-volt line is the one in the top right corner, and so is this one. You see it also on the bigger trace here. So this is our 5-volt line. And if you look at the trace and the VR connection, there is nothing wrong with it. So it is highly unlikely that we have here somewhere a crack in the trace. Even here, if I look at the mouse, it looks perfectly fine. Those two 5-volt lines go to 2 inductors that are right behind the connector. And even here, if I look at both SMD components, I can't tell anything wrong with them. There is no crack, there is nothing going on. However, let's follow the trace of our 5-volt line for the keyboard. So it is this inductor here. And here I found something very interesting. So let's zoom in a little bit closer. I have never seen something like this. So here you can't see any crack in the inductor. This looks like it's a perfectly working inductor. There is no damage around the board. But now let's zoom into the solder joint. So this side looks okay. Oh no, look at this. Do you see this tiny crack? Do you see this crack here in the solder? And if I go on the other side, you see the same crack. Look at this. There is a small crack. Let's see if we can get the light in here. There is a small crack in the solder. It's so tiny, I can't even focus the microscope correctly. There it is. Maybe I can switch on another light. It's very hard to see, but there is a crack. So I'm not sure exactly what happened, but this entire inductor either was hit right here. I'm not sure if this was an impact from something else or this was from my probe while I was probing around before. And that is why I changed behavior. Every time I used a multimeter probe to measure where this connection goes to, I may have hit the crack and closed the solder crack a little bit by deforming the solder there. And that is why it was so odd. And I couldn't find it so easily. So I see that it is cracked on both sides. And that is what made it so easy to lose connection when I just tapped the connector a little bit. Now let's see if I can just break this off without going there with a soldering iron. I mean, I could just reflow it, but I just want to see if I can move it, and I don't want to break it. It's still somehow attached that it doesn't want to easily go off, so I could use pliers, but that is just too much physical force. I don't want to do that. I think this is our problem. I really think this is our problem now. Here you can see the crack, I think. Now you can see the crack very easily. Here is the crack that goes around and goes through the entire solder joint here. Let's try to get this component off the board. So much time. I think I spent about 4 hours trying to debug that circuit, trying to find out where it is and where the location is. In the end, poking the board and trying to flex it in different areas led me to this spot. So there was nothing really that I could easily measure because sometimes it was working, sometimes it's not. If it's always not working, it's easy to find out, but you never know. Is the connection there now or not? You have no idea. So let's see. What happens if I just tap this side of the inductor? Will there something fall off? Maybe I'll reflow the wrong side. No, this thing is strong on there. Okay. I'll use the hot tweezers to get this component off because we need to have a look at it. There you go. Super quick and easy. And now... No, this component looks perfectly fine. I still want to get the excess solder off and look at the contacts of this component because, well, we never know. This side looks good as well. And this side also looks good. There is no problem with this component. It's fine. Let's just make sure one last test before we get this back on the board. It's an inductor, it should just be like a closed circuit. Yeah, the component works. So let's get it back on the board. So all I need to do now is to add the keyboard connector back to the board. Unfortunately, I removed it twice now, but this was necessary to have a good look at this component. Otherwise, I don't think I would have ever spotted that crack in the solder. I really thought we have a broken trace somewhere, and I also expected it to be maybe an inner layer of the board. Luckily, that was not the case. I'll put this board together now, and then we will test it one last time. And this time, when we put some force on the connector, it should not affect the keyboard. So essentially all what happened the entire time was that we cut power to the keyboard. And when the connection was re-established, the keyboard just restarted or reinitialized. And yeah, this was a very interesting fault I have never seen before. Okay, let me put this together and then we will see the board one more time on the test bench. And I hope that from now on, we will no longer have any keyboard related issues. Okay, here is a very tiny plot twist. This inductor here was not the only problem on this board. Right next to it was a fuse that also was no longer attached to the board. And I discovered this because once I tried to test the board, it was much better, but still the keyboard did restart from time to time. And you can see here, this is the component that was here. It looks normal, it didn't crack. But if you look at this end of the fuse, it's fine. And if you look at the other side, you see that the contact is missing. When I desoldered it, the contact basically was stuck to the board. And there was a crack in the contact that goes around this edge. So yeah, this caused another problem with continuity to the 5-volt line of our keyboard. And yeah, so now let's try and see if we finally fixed all our loose connections here. So we had a crack in the solder on this inductor and we had a crack in the contact of the fuse on this side. Yeah. So now let's see if the board is finally fixed. Finally, this board is 100% working. I have fixed the PCI slot. There was one of the connectors broken off. The ISA slot never had a problem, it just doesn't like my post analyzer card. And while I was fixing this keyboard connector issue, I found a few weak solder spots along the way that needed to be reflown anyway. So this was all in all more than just a keyboard connector fix. We have seen this bent pin on one of the monitoring ICs and everything else that I fixed in the previous video, including all the broken traces that were scattered around the board. I'm really curious if you encountered a problem like this on one of your retro boards, or maybe one of your boards is suffering from exactly this issue right now. Think about it. This connector is probably the one that is exposed to the most physical force. It's the keyboard and the mouse connector. Those ones most likely are disconnected and reconnected the most on this board. And every time you insert or remove the mouse or keyboard, it does add physical force to the connector and the board. And that could have been the reason why the solder joint cracked. It could be that it was hit by something, but I don't know if it would break like this on both sides. I think it was from the physical force every time you add or remove the mouse or the keyboard. So yeah, if you have a non-working keyboard or mouse, check the SMD components behind this connector. Maybe you will find the cause there and you will save yourself a lot of time trying to poke around the entire board. And that is all I have for you today. Let me know in the comments what you think about this project. If you want to support my work, you can head over to Patreon. There are a few tiers for you to pick from, and if you want to just browse around, you can opt for the free tier. Sometimes I post updates for videos that have already been released and don't justify to make a full video about. And finally, I want to thank all the people that are already supporting this channel on Patreon. Thank you very much, and thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in one of my future videos. Take care and bye bye.